Hello, and welcome to the Southcoast Artists Index, where artists, performers, and writers, as well as curators, directors, and supporters, anyone with ties to the creative community, drops by to introduce themselves to you. We'll talk about their beginnings, their vision, their passion, and so much more. The Southcoast Artist Index podcast is brought to you in part by Heavenly Spirits, who invites you to celebrate the art of life and creative communities everywhere. Learn more at heavenlyspirits.com.
Hi, this is Ron Fortier with another episode of the In Focus podcast brought to you by the Southcoast Artist Index. And we're going to let the guest artists introduce themselves as per usual on this show, and we'll take it from there.
Randy Swann, Randy Swann, 2 N's.
Okay, it's not Randall.
No, well, it is, but I never use it.
Yeah, it's like Ronald.
Yeah.
Hey, how did you feel with Monsters, Inc. when Randall was like the arch villain?
Yeah, I that's true. I no, I don't identify with that name much at all. So, something important.
Yeah. And how do you spell it?
What, Randall?
Yeah.
Randall.
Okay, and how is the sobriquet, which is the shortened version, to Randy?
Randy, Randy.
Okay, not IE. No. Well, you never know. You never know.
I know.
Never know. And Swan is with 2 N's.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Tell us a little bit about your. Everybody's got that. I've been drawing since I was a child, and I know you have, because I went on your website. Tell us a little bit about that television personality on WCVB.
Oh, Captain Coddle. No, Captain Bob. Captain Bob was his name.
Bob Emery?
It wasn't Bob Emery. It was
okay.
Captain Bob, and I forget his last name now, but he sort of looked like he had white hair and a white goatee, and he wore a Greek fisherman cap, and he would draw as he told stories. And to me, it was absolute magic. I remember just sitting there, like it was a drawing lesson, but it was a storytelling event too.
Mm-hmm.
Would be telling a story about the woods. It was usually nature related. Wasn't always maritime, but it was, Peter Rabbit sort of stuff. It was, but he didn't dumb down the drawing part. I've looked back in YouTube, and man, he really was teaching drawing. I mean, as well as anybody I ever had in high school, that's for sure. Simple line drawings, but very anatomical. There's one you can find on YouTube of him drawing a cat.
Mm-hmm.
And he's talking about the way the skull is, and this is where you do this. It's not just make this line, then this line. And I thought, first of all, it was magic that you could make your own drawings, that somebody actually probably drew Cat in a Hat. I was that age. This is when I was 5 and 6 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just enthralled by it and wanted to do it, wanted to learn how. So I started drawing all the time.
Do you remember the day part? Because I remember, and we're only like maybe about 5 years, 5-6 years age difference. Me being older, it was Big Brother Bob. I would come home. I went to Immaculate Conception School, which was on Earl Street in New Bedford, the north end of New Bedford, and we were released for lunch. We'd go home for lunch.
Yeah.
And Big Brother Bob Emery, oddly enough, I had his daughter in my drawing class at the University of Miami. There's a whole nother story there. I can't talk about it on I'm a gentle folks, or genteel folks. But he would raise a glass of milk. It was at noontime. He would raise a glass of milk, and they would do salute to the flag. But I don't remember that particular artist. The one I do remember is John Nagy. Do you remember John Nagy?
No, I don't think so. I don't remember him. This was local. This was like the same along the same lines as Major Mud or something, you know. It was
Yeah, or
local to
Boomtown.
you. Yeah, Rex
Boomtown was
Trailer.
out of, yeah,
Yep.
that was all out of CVB.
Yeah.
My friend
Yeah.
Steve Fuller, by the way, designed the Channel 5 logo, which is still
They
going
still use.
strong for like almost 50 years now.
It's
Yeah.
a really good logo. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
I have another. We'll talk about that later. I have this dual personality of painting and graphic design. So it's
I know the
I'm finally
feeling.
getting to change it in my 60s finally, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, but yeah, so this guy was local, and someone told me he lived in Brockton, but I don't know, and I never met the man. Um, but and you can look up. There's some information about him online, but I've just forgotten the last name. He was very gentle, but he was very firm teacher, just very matter of fact. This is what you do,
Hmm.
and from there I just started drawing, and you know, along the way it became part of my identity. I
Hmm.
think, like many of the people you've talked to, you know, it's like you became known as the kid who could draw, you
Yeah.
know. So you know, you got put onto book report teams so you could make it look pretty.
Right.
They didn't think you had a brain. They thought you could just draw, you know.
Right. Yeah, 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 yeah. And boy, I'm flashing back like all over the place on that. And it's also too getting busted in class for drawing
Oh
when
yeah.
you should have been paying attention.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And you know, when I was in high school at the age of, you know, in the 70s, early
Hmm.
70s,
Hmm.
I would do things like draw the zigzag man, you know, all over my book covers and things, and
Right.
people, oh, look what he can do, you know. It was
Yeah.
like,
Oh, the Rolling
next thing,
Stones.
oh yeah,
When
the
you get
lip.
your yeah-yeahs out. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I got good at all that stuff because, like a lot of people back then, a lot of aspiring artists either wanted to be a cartoonist or do album covers. That was like, oh, I would love
Yeah.
to design album covers, you know. And
Yeah.
so, you know, that was like the first impetus as far as making a living doing it. Not that I
Yeah.
knew anything about that, but
I only know one guy who actually did an album cover. Going back to Steve Fuller, he was a year behind me, but Steve was
uh,
already actually, it was a bunch of the guys that I was in class with at the University of Miami in graduate school.
mhm.
They already had careers and they burnt out, and they thought, oh, yeah, I'll teach. And then somebody said, hey, you got to go for a master's degree. Like, what the hell for? Right. So look at my portfolio. I didn't need to go back to school. So anyway, I remember Steve running some of his design classes because we all had, paying assistantships and such. And him telling me, I don't have my students do book covers or album covers because you ain't never going to do one more than likely. He says, I have them do lawnmower repair ads for the yellow pages and the most bizarre, crappy ass jobs
Yep.
because that's what you're going to get.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's
Now,
true.
amongst us, was a guy, you probably have his album, and that's Styx, that's Merlin holding the orb out. And that was
Oh, cool.
Leon Rosenblatt, who won an international award for that album, as well as a trunk full of other awards for his illustrations.
Huh. Well, so
Yeah.
somebody got to do it. That's good, you know.
So, okay, from high school, how did you decide to go to undergraduate school, or did you get any pushback from your family saying how you going to
Uh,
feed yourself?
a little bit. It was funny. Part of the reason I ended up at Swain was because my father had this bias towards against state schools and for private schools.
Really?
So it was, oh, you know, if you're going to do this, which I don't think hit him until I was probably in my senior year, was like, oh, he's serious about this. I better manage this because I was a good student also.
Mm-hmm.
Um, he kept saying you should go to liberal arts for 4 years and then figure out if you still want to go to art school. And I was like, that's a waste of 4 years, Dad. Not just money, but time and So I talked him into looking at least some schools. I wanted to go to Mass Art. That I had a teacher in high school pushed Mass Art. I wanted to go to Mass Art. My girlfriend at the time, who's now my wife, was going to SMU for nursing. So I said, oh, well, this will be even better. I'll go to SMU because then I'll get to see her all the time and whatever. And I was 17 years old, and I didn't take it that seriously. I was like, yeah, I'll go to one of those. Mass Art is where I really want to go, but SMU is supposed to be pretty good too. So
it was.
Yeah,
I'm
and
biased.
my dad sort of discouraged that and kept saying, "Oh, you should look at some private schools." And so I looked at RISD, and I had never heard of Swain, who had outside of New Bedford, So I worked at a hospital at the time, like mopping floors, and one of the pathologists had a cousin or something that went to this little school in New Bedford. And he told me, boy, you should look at it. It's supposed to be really great school, blah, blah, blah. So I said, okay, to appease my dad, I went down there. And at the interview, I fell in love with the school. At the interview, I said, I have to go here. And I couldn't tell you why. It was all gut.
Well, I was going to ask you why, because I'm still fascinated. I mean, I graduated in 75 from SMU. We spent a lot of time hanging around with the Swaineys, the old Rodman mansion, especially John Robson. I knew his dad before he even got married. And I always say I knew John Robson in the womb. And so he was down there. He was down there for the Rasta band and all the other stuff. So, I mean, there was an interaction, and it was a weird thing. It's like, we thought we were much better painters and that the Swaineys were much better designers. And then I've spoken with several Swaineys who said, no, it's the opposite. I was like, okay. But the point.
I thought that too.
Really?
And I don't think there was any good reason for it. I didn't really know a lot of people that were in the art program at SMU.
Yeah.
There was really no interaction when I was there.
Yeah. What years were you there?
I was there from 75 until 79.
All right. Yeah, I was already in grad school by then. Mm-hmm. But what is it? I mean, I can feel for you guys because when we graduated, there was no such thing as CVPA, the College of Visual and Performing Arts. It was the art department.
Yeah.
And the art department, and I've got to really do the research on this, was founded by Ed Tornieri, who at one time was an instructor, and I heard he may have been an interim president or president for a short while, for whatever reason, of the Swain. So now we've got that Swain connection. Was that?
Oh, I said a lot of people seem to be interim presidents.
Yeah.
A lot of administrative turmoil.
Yeah, it seemed to just, they went through them like poops through a goose. Yeah. But then too, Tornieri was a student of Hoffman, as David Loeffler Smith was. Yeah. So there's this legacy, which is all part and parcel of this thing that will eventually complete, called the Artist Index. It's really about the local artists' genealogy, especially the painters. Yeah. But the Swaineys still carry this enormous hole in their heart, in their gut. And I've spoken with the powers that be at UMass, and their attitude is like, well, they should get over it. Really? And I said, well, it's hard because even though I can come back here to UMass, a lot of us still have problems saying UMass Dartmouth. It's SMU. That's what it was. It's like selling your parents' house. I remember, well, after my dad, stepmom and dad passed away, you go by the house, and after we sold the house. And then my brother, asked me, have you gone by the house? It's like, what for, Jim? They don't live there anymore. Yeah. I mean, that we had to turn the page on that part of our life, but going back to UMass for us is kind of weirder than you guys being ripped out of the womb, so to speak, and thrown into SMU, because it was still SMU at the time. Here, meet your new step parents, you know.
Right.
But there's no there for us. There are buildings. I mean, I went into marketing. You know, I did layouts. That's how I started because of those guys in Miami. I did layouts. And so I ended up in advertising, and then I ended up teaching marketing as an adjunct instructor at the Charlton College of Business. And I remember one day I'm in a lecture studio in what we used to call Group 1, which they refer to as LARTS. And I went, oh my God, this is the senior painting studio. And I'm like, I wonder if I go in the closet and if we still have any residue, you know, black oil residue still on the walls in there, you know? So, but what is it about Swain? Because you said you just went for your interview and you were already like sucked into this vortex of whatever Swain is or was, or I gotta say is, because it's never stopped.
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of it had to do with the structure and the intimacy. I never felt like I was in a college the whole time I was there. I felt like I was in a community of artists. And I mean, I didn't even really pay attention to my grades. I just wanted to please my teachers and my peers, and I wanted to make myself better and just work hard. They made you want to work hard, just by example and by osmosis. You know, when you're in a campus that's under 200 kids and the teachers don't change very much, it's sort of, in the 4 years I was there wasn't a lot of over faculty turmoil or anything, or even the administrative. I missed that.
Mrs. Lincoln,
you know,
for example, was she there when you were there?
No. It was
Rosalind Lincoln, I think was her name.
Okay. When I was there, the president was Gene Lazinski, who was one of the art history professors. And then they got a guy in, William Britton, who was there, and there was some hijinks with finances and things, and he got kind of driven out. And by the time senior year came along, we had another interim who was Helen Goddard, who was a local, like, she was on the board of trustees, and she stepped in while they looked for the guy who eventually became Bruce Genuine, who I never met. So in the pre-internet days, once you left school, a school like Swain that didn't have a lot of formal alumni kind of organization, the school just disappeared off your radar while you did whatever you were doing, whether you were in New York or you got married or whatever you did. So it went away completely. And it wasn't until Facebook started that, outside of the people that stayed in New Bedford, the rest of the Swain community sort of had some place to go and find out what people were doing. I mean, that's my theory on it. And by then there's enough water under the bridge that you're kind of coming back to all the good things that you remember about the place you were at. Does that make sense?
I think it does. I mean, admittedly, I've got to say, I was like one of the dumbest people on the planet. I was in high school. My art teacher was Francisco Raposa, who was a phenomenal watercolorist. And he was also a traditionalist. He was also my drafting teacher. I learned more from that man. It's, and when you start talking about some of these teachers and your throat starts to get tight, it's got to tell you something. So he says to me, so what are you going to do when you get out of here? And I was like, oh. And so he says, well, why don't you go to SMU? He says, and, I'll help you put together a portfolio, which he did. And I went, and the first person I bumped into was Herb Cummings, Alma Cummings' dad. And another guy that I have difficulty talking about. And he says, so what do you got? So I open up my portfolio and he looks at it. It must have taken like 45 seconds. And he goes, okay. So I'm standing there And he's like, so what are you doing? He said, get your ass to the admissions building. You're in. I mean, and it was that kind of,
Yeah.
God, we didn't even have that in graduate school. It wasn't that, I hate to say the word, good. I mean, I got most of what I got out of graduate school from the other graduates.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So now you go through Swain.
Yeah.
And where did you go from there?
I got married.
Okay.
And I went to work, and because I was a painter and trying to figure out what to do, I did a number of jobs. I worked at a hospital, like I said. I did everything there for a while, up to, emergency room orderly and things like that. And then I left there and I went to a small printer, because I always said, I mean, when I got into Swain, I went through the first 2 years thinking I was going to be a graphic designer. And I got seduced along the way and became a painter at my sophomore review. I hadn't even really put a lot of thought to it, but at my sophomore review, I remember saying I surprised a lot of the teachers, and I think I even surprised myself and said, I think I want to be a painter. And David jumped right on my case as far as he wanted me to be a painter. Some of the design instructors weren't very happy with me. But I always had in the back of my head that I didn't want to change the design world. I've never had any of those high aspirations to be the next great painter, the next um, great graphic designer, but I always knew I just wanted to use my talent to support myself if I could. So as I was looking for non-menial jobs, I looked at it, I saw a job for a paste-up artist at a printer, pre-computer days. I didn't know what a paste-up artist was.
Wax and razor blades.
Yeah, but I saw artists. And I went, So I applied and I got in. And I worked there for 3 years. And I call that my grad school, because I learned everything about printing and layout that I hadn't already learned or didn't have some sort of aptitude for. So, I learned how to to be a typesetter. I learned how to do stripping. I even ran small presses. So it was kind of a grad school, and I left from there and went into the abyss of advertising, which you will absolutely relate to, because I had friends who said, once you get into advertising, you'll never get out. Nobody will ever take you seriously again, as far as design is concerned. And I said, okay, but you know what? They're paying pretty good, and I've got a baby and whatever. And I went to Child World. If you remember,
I remember Child World, yeah.
I worked there, and because I had some sort of organizational skills, which still elude me that I do, I became production manager. And from there, I went to another little small retailer called Stewart's, which there was one in New Bedford. And Stewart's was a tiny little, like, Family Dollar type store. But they were one of the first advertising departments in retail that went to digital, like desktop publishing. So in 1984, I was trained how to use all these programs and became all of a sudden a digital artist. I was painting the whole time when I could, but I was making a living too. And then about halfway through that, I decided I got to get out of advertising, because I really didn't like what I was doing at a higher level. I didn't like marketing. I thought it wasn't a whole thing about selling out. It was just about the types of people I had to deal with, who were good people, but they were everything. You'll relate to this too. Everything had to have numbers to quantify it.
Mm-hmm. And everything had to be bigger, bolder, blacker, redder. And it was like, okay, if everything's bigger, bolder, blacker,
where do you go?
Nothing's going to stand out.
Right. So because of my knowledge of graphic applications, I landed a job out of retail in my backyard. I was the luckiest guy on the earth and got to go into Ocean Spray Cranberries as first. I was there just to put desktop publishing in, and then there was a reorganization like they always have. And I
was
became,
it Aldous when you Aldous 1.0, wasn't it? It was the first one, right? Yeah.
Freehand.
Yeah.
Aldous Freehand and Photoshop.
Yeah.
After I was at Ocean Spray 2 years, they had a reorganization. I found myself as the global design manager for Ocean Spray Cranberries.
Wow.
And I did that for another 20 years.
Were you there for Craisins?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Did you ever run into Bernie Roth?
Bernie Roth.
Typical Jewish, almost academic, genius kind of a guy.
Yeah.
Nonplussed. He was smarter than you. He was smarter than everybody in the room, and he was on the Craisin project.
Okay.
He was a consultant, freelancer, or whatever you call people of his ilk.
Yeah. So I got to work on a great brand. I mean, graphic design friends of mine were looking at me like, how the hell did you get this? I mean, how did you end up there? You had no career path. And I ended up with a really nice career there with great people. I got to travel all around the country. I got to work with great design agencies in New York and San Francisco and Chicago. It was wonderful.
Oliveira, there was a designer up there named Oliveira. George, was it Oliveira?
Where?
At Ocean Spray, yeah. He may have been one of these outside guys that came in, an agency guy at one time. I think it was Oliveira.
Okay, it might have been before my time.
Could have been Bob, yeah. I don't know. Time fades the memories quite a bit, So, were you burnt out? Because, from my personal experience, people say, why didn't you paint for all this time? It's like, I come home, I was like brain dead. I told my ex-wife, my wife at the time, that I'd rather be digging holes all day long. My body would be tired, but my brain wouldn't be burned out. And then, like you said, I used to refer to them, the people that we had to deal with, the customer side, and on the other side, as personalities. Yeah.
That's kind. Yeah. It was great opportunity, and the company was at a point that it was still, can believe it or not, it's still considered a pretty small. It's a farmer's co-op. So the people I worked with the first 2/3 of my career there were very different than the last third, when it had to get very competitive. And the Pepsis came in, and Quaker Oats, and we had alliances, and there were more marketers per square inch in that place than anywhere. It got to be, and along the way, because I was not a guy who was especially concerned with getting to the next level on the corporate chain, I got kind of run over by all the marketers. I used to say I'm the only right brain in the room. There'd be 40 marketers I'd have to deal with, and I'm going to lose that argument every time. I would talk about things in the design that they would just laugh at and just, no. I mean, example is, when we came out with a 100% juice line, I remember getting in a knockdown argument with one of the marketers who said, I've got research that says it has to say premium. And I'll say, well, what do you mean it has to say it? You don't have to put the word premium on there. We'll make it premium. No, it says right here. That was so literal. And finally I said, what kind of car do you drive? And he said, I drive a Lexus. Why? And I said, does it have the word premium on the front of it so you know it's premium? Of course not, but that's different than the grocery shelf. And I was like, no, not really. You guys make it different. So.
And you wonder why art directors would burn out by the time they were 35. because they had to, between the art director and the creative director, they had to be batting these guys off.
Oh yeah, yeah. So people would ask me how I stood it, and I would say, you get to the point where you don't really care. And I would say to them, I don't care. People would at work say things to me, and I say, this is the least creative part of my life, and it's the most creative part of your life. That's why we don't connect. Because in 2001, I started painting again, like with a fury on my own, because I wasn't exhausted coming home because I didn't care anymore. So, okay, I'll come home and spend all that energy here and start painting again. With the idea that I always knew I was going to segue into a fine art career again. And it happened. That's all I've been doing now. I haven't worked for 3 years in the corporate world. They gave me a very nice package along with about 100 other people as they got more taken over by other companies. And I was glad to leave when I did. I was 60 years old. Yeah, give me a good package and I can survive.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. It's I always used to convince myself that the only good thing about advertising was that at least I got to know I knew when all the sales were going to happen before they happened. So I could tell family, hey, don't bite that. Just wait until, And then the other thing too is I remember the first time I had to pay for a ticket to Martha's Vineyard. It was like, what? Are you kidding me? I used to have so many comps, and that was another thing, all the comps. I mean, I got through I don't know how many years of never having to buy anything because it was all given to you,
Yeah,
but it really wasn't worth it. I remember it was like 9:30, 10 o'clock, whatever. I was in my agency. It was a small agency on Union Street, Union and Cottage. And I looked at the time and I had been there since 6 o'clock that morning. And the economy was already starting to get wonky.
Yeah.
Again.
Yeah.
And I said to myself, you know what? I don't think anybody's going to fault me for quitting. But if I stick this out and I go bankrupt, if I lose the business, then they're all going to just say, see, he's an idiot.
Right.
So I just said, you know what? I quit.
Yeah. I they would send interns into me, marketing interns to sit and talk about graphic design. And I had this whole PowerPoint presentation because if it's not in PowerPoint, it doesn't exist. I made a PowerPoint presentation of visual literacy and really gave them a whole thing of this is what real graphic design's all about. But you guys won't ever want to use it because you're going to have to trust somebody and not numbers. There's no research that's going to tell you that this is a good design as opposed to a bad design. They'll sell you all kinds of research telling you that, eye tracking, all these different things, but that's not going to do it. You have to rely on experts for that. And you guys are great at hiring experts like myself, but you won't listen to us. You just want to be able to say that you have somebody there to do it. So, I did get a little cynical about it over time, but when you're anywhere for as long as 22 years, you tend to see a lot of the warts, At the end of the day, it was a farmer's co-op that was selling a really good product. I really did think that. I wasn't selling cigarettes. I wasn't selling, I wouldn't have been able to do that. I wouldn't have been able to work in an agency where I had a lot of different, clients per se. And I immersed myself in the brand. I got to, art direct a lot of great stuff there over the years, and I had a few wins. So that's
I've got one for you. There was a great commercial. I've tried to find it.
Okay.
They eradicated this commercial from the face of the earth. I thought it was fantastic because it was that honesty campaign.
Yeah.
Okay. And it was the one with the contractor who he comes strutting in and he says, typical contractor mode. First, we're going to rip this all out and expose it to the elements. He says, and then I'm going to inexplicably disappear for like 3 weeks.
Yeah.
Okay. And
Yeah,
then it was about honesty. Well, you know what? The National Builders NBA, the National Builders Association went freaked out, and they made Ocean Spray yank that commercial, and I could never find it for my classes to show them how good a commercial that was.
I remember that one. Yeah. Yeah. That was the other thing that was interesting there is the one big battle I always won was keep advertisers away from the packaging. Like, let me manage this with package design agencies, real experts, not advertising agencies, or you get things like what happened at Tropicana. That was an ad agency that designed
that was a huge.
Yeah. So, I'd like to think I brought a little in there, but over time it eroded and eroded. So I was just putting in time, and it came at the right time to leave, and it got me in my studio. So even more.
So what was the first genre that you picked up on? I'm familiar with your mill, your urbanscapes, let's call them that, in the mills and the streetscapes.
Yep. Those have always been something I've delved into a little bit. Even at school, I loved landscaping. So when I was a painting major, my last 2 years, I worked with Ben Martinez. He was my mentor. Of course, everybody is your mentor, but he was my advisor. And Ben just wanted I remember he wanted to see at the beginning, he wanted to instill the work ethic into us so much. He made us cut up masonite panels like 4x6 size, gesso them all. And he said, I want to see 50 paintings every Friday at Crit. Quantity,
Holy
not
crap.
quality. But he didn't want us to, he said, a bad painting is better than a good idea. I used to love that quote. And we went out and did a lot of work, and you'd throw them all up on Friday Crit, which was all day. And, you'd learn from little bits of things. They weren't complete paintings. And it was, so I love to do landscapes. So I took that, and for the next 2 years, I was hardly at the school during the day, unless I had a liberal arts class. I didn't paint much in my studio. I painted plein air, all over Westport and Tiverton and, Dartmouth. And I just had a lot of fun exploring and doing landscapes. When I started painting again in 2001, and I never stopped painting, but that's when I consider like when I really got back into it. All of a sudden I realized for the first time, you don't have to paint plein air. That sounds really stupid, but I was like, maybe I need to slow down and work more methodically indoors. And with digital photography, I can take 1 million photos of things because I'm still doing landscapes, and use those as reference points and make the paintings inside. So that was a big aha to me, because I'm kind of thick that way. It took a long time,
I know
it was
feeling,
like, and that opened up an awful lot for me. Subject matter, though, I try not to think too hard and go from my gut again. It's like, what am I going to paint? What am I interested enough to paint in now? I'll think about it later. It's sort of like I'll lay track by getting a lot of paintings out, and then I'll look at it. Kate Levin at Crowell's.
Oh yeah, right.
She taught me a lot about that. She said to me, you shouldn't think about your painting until you get some paintings to think about, because you'll get caught in the conceptual wheel and you won't have any work out. But if you have something that's physical there, then, and get other people to look at it then, because they'll add something in there. They'll see things you didn't see, but you felt, and they'll maybe pull it out.
Now, have you ever done anything that was considered not you? In other words, people say, oh, I know Randy's work. And then you decided for some reason you were going to do something that wasn't you, or theoretically, because obviously it's got to be you. But so antithetical to your style, your whatever.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I've done a couple things like that. Watercolors recently.
I was just going to ask you because, is this right, Randy?
Yeah, the watercolors.
Yeah, I was like, what is it with the watercolors? Where's the buildings? Where's the
Yeah,
cars?
it freed me up. It
Yeah.
freed me up a lot, even in the way that I paint. I've had it's kind of top of mind right now because of a physical situation I had. I've had carpal tunnel syndrome for the last 3 years, and because of that, I'm very strongly left-handed.
Mm-hmm.
Every lefty is sort of ambidextrous anyway. You kind of have to be, but I started painting right-handed on purpose, and with that and the watercolors, I started. It made me feel different, and the watercolors especially got very. There's no control there anyway, and I'm working with my offhand. Um, it's been really kind of a self experiment, a little interesting
Mm-hmm.
experiment. I did do a couple big oil paintings that I worked right-handed on purpose, and they came out very different. Um, they were different subject matter too, though. So it was kind of, they were on the verge of abstract, much more abstract than I usually work in.
Mm-hmm.
Although I'd argue that most of my paintings have a lot of abstraction in them.
Well,
Yeah.
an objective painting has the abstraction is the composition. That's the thing that holds it all together. If you do the eye squint and all that other thing,
Yeah.
That's what holds it all together.
Yeah. And I've also had that kind of dichotomy with graphic design. A lot of my
Mm-hmm.
painting, you can tell, come from somebody who has done design. They're very linear paintings, and that's just what they are. I mean, I could paint painterly, but that wouldn't be me. Yeah.
Yeah. I fell into the design only because Steve Fuller said, you're going to be leaving here pretty soon. I got another year to go. He was from up here. His mom was the Registry of Motor Vehicles, the registrar's secretary.
Okay.
And he says, you're going to be heading up north. He says, and unless you want to be doing boats in water for the rest of your life, he says, you got to have some sort of a practical skill so you can eat. And so he taught me how to do layout. And he says, look, you're really good at composing. Yeah. So it's the same thing. It's weights and balances and, and so I started doing that, and never really wanted to be a designer, but I never felt comfortable around other designers. I always felt like I was a wolf in sheep's clothing.
Yeah, I know.
So I started writing, and so the writing took the edge off of that, and I found myself. Well, John Robson did a lot of work for me when I had my agency. Because he can really put stuff together.
Yes.
Back to this left-hand, right-hand sort of thing. It's kind of interesting because painting houses, and I'm one of those people that's like, I'm so pedantic that give me French doors, which would drive. I don't need no stinking tape. I can do it all freehand, right? And I train myself to paint with both hands. But I'll be damned if I can go to the canvas and do the same thing.
Really?
Even when I was painting abstract.
Yeah.
It's like,
that's funny. That's funny. I mean, I couldn't. I just had carpal tunnel surgery 3 weeks ago.
Yeah. How's it going?
Oh, it's great. I mean, look at this.
Wow.
It's arthroscopic now.
Really?
Yeah. They went in 2 stitches, clipped the thing, come out. I was using my hand that day.
Well, because I had, it's a genetic disorder, which means we have Scandinavian blood in
so do I.
And it's called Dupuytren's. It's the Scandinavian disease with a French name, Dupuytren's contracture. A lot of people think it's trigger finger, which is a whole different thing, but my little finger curled up. And
Oh,
I was reading
yeah.
about it, and they said most people will tolerate it until they're sick and tired of poking themselves in the eye when they're washing their face. So I went in, and we're talking like a 4-inch thunderbolt scar. I'm
yeah.
wondering, wow, what a difference.
So since I've had that,
Yeah.
I now have feeling in my left hand again, because I had lost feeling in 3 fingers.
It went numb from the middle finger to the little finger. Wow.
To the thumb.
To the thumb, really?
Yeah, so it was really hard.
Yeah.
So because of that, I lost all the strength in my thumb.
You lost your grip?
I lost my grip. So I started, and even now, because the strength isn't 100% back, I kind of teaching myself to write with my right hand. It's a little bit of an experiment too, because I like being able to do both.
Mm-hmm.
I've always been able to paint with both hands, but I couldn't do any drawing with my right hand. But now I can. So
truth be told, I have to ask my mom, because I'm lucky she's still around. She's 94, and you just reminded me. Ambidextrous isn't really the correct term. There's another term. Ambidextrous means that you can do the exact same thing at the exact same time. It doesn't mean that, like, for example, I was never good at sports because I was so damn nearsighted. But I know I always had confusion when I'd go up to the plate to bat, because it was like, well, either way suited me. It's like golfing is the same thing. It's like my brain's going, well, pick a side, and I was comfortable both ways. But yet throwing a ball or bowling, I was much more left-hand dominant. And then I'm thinking, I went to Catholic school. I'm wondering, the lefty, and they tried to take the devil out of my hand.
Yeah, that could be.
What I have to ask her that?
Sinister.
Yeah, because I mean, I still have, like I said, there's certain things I favor the left side for versus the right.
I always joke with one of my sons is very right-handed, but he golfs and bats left-handed, which isn't that unusual when you think of the major leagues. There's more left-handed batters than right-handed. And I used to joke with him, the only thing that I was really good at was toll booths back when they, I could go through and just dump. Now those are gone,
Yeah.
So
yeah.
It's been sort of, the mechanics of it has been different, but the subject matter at the moment is still landscape, and it's still very edgy, like a lot of edge stuff, push and pull from Hoffman. I love Fairfield Porter and Rackstraw Downs. They're like my heroes, not because of the subject matter, but just the way they play with space. I didn't know until pretty recently, I think Ben Martinez told me that that Fairfield Porter was Rackstraw Downs' teacher, and I never knew that.
That would explain
but it made
things,
sense to me, totally made sense.
Yeah.
I also, Hopper gets thrown out with my work a lot because of the buildings and the solitary. I haven't figured out why I don't do figures. I can paint them, but Kate Levin had a psychological theory that the cars in my paintings represented people. And I have some deep-rooted psychological issue with showing people as people. That was her theory, not mine.
Really?
I'm not a car person, but I tend to, maybe it's because there's a lot of cars in urban settings.
Well, I mean, that's one of the things. I mean, you get enamored with the Impressionists and all that other stuff when you're in school between your art history classes, and then everybody goes through that little bit of an Impressionist phase because you want to try, the pointillisme, and then you look at the urban landscape and you're going, there's a freaking car there.
Right.
And it's like, move that damn car out of there. I don't want that car there. And I think painting the car is probably more difficult than it is painting the person, because it's either going to be part of the composition or it's going to look like a sore thumb, like a fly on the canvas. It just doesn't belong there. And the other thing too is when you do the buildings, the brick buildings, especially the patinization of the bricks, and there is that surrealistic light, that is it the nuclear flash, is that the light is, that flash, and then, oh shit.
Yeah.
You know.
Yep.
What do you see for the future, as far as your work is going?
You know, I'm just going to try to paint a lot, and paint as much from my gut as I can, because when I try to force things into a series or whatever, I stumble. And uh, that's something I've had to learn the hard way. There's been a full year that I just was trying to do this big series. And at the end, I felt like, why did I force myself into that? Why did I seem to think I needed that structure? Whereas if I had gone a little more freestyle and just painted what I feel that day, then at the end, maybe I would have had a series, you know, it would have come together on its own. So I think that I'm going to continue that way. The other thing that I've recently decided I'm going to do is when I finish a painting, I'm going to let it marinate for a while in my studio before I consider it finished. Because the last 3 months with the COVID-19's part of it, I have revisited some paintings that I thought were kind
Yeah,
of
and I
dull.
like that first one better, by the way. Not
Did
the
you really?
2020. Yeah, for some reason it was just like, and it, I've had this conversation. A bunch of us get together from the VFA of '75. It's
Yeah,
called Techum. It's for Tognieri, Elliott, McCoy, uh, and Cummings,
yeah,
and
that's nice.
uh, Tognieri, Elliott, Cummings, and McCoy,
Yeah,
and there are some of us in the group that are like, oh, it sucks, and scrapes it all off and starts all over again.
yeah,
I don't do that. And they're like, well, it's not about preciousness. It's like, no, it's not about
right,
preciousness.
right.
There's just something that doesn't allow me to not admit defeat, but I
Yeah,
want a reminder of that really sucked. You know what I mean?
yeah,
And
yeah,
sometimes some of the ones that I think were horrible and I put them away.
yeah,
And if I got to clean out the studio or whatever, and I look at it and I go, that wasn't that freaking bad. And the one I really liked, it was like,
yeah.
furniture store art.
Isn't that interesting, huh?
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
it's like the ones that you do and you go, but then everybody else that looks at it goes, wow, and that's the one they want to buy. It's
Now,
like, "Ooh."
do you ever paint yourself? I call it painting myself into a corner. Now, especially when I was doing abstract pieces, and I can't say was,
Yeah,
because I have taken a foray from abstract to objective, and
uh-huh,
it's like social realism, social expressionism.
yeah,
It's a long story. Um, that's why I went into abstract, because the stuff that I was dealing with was horrible stuff,
right, right,
and
yeah,
it just kind of weighted me
yeah,
down. So I try to paint nothing as an abstractionist, and I try to paint with no feelings. Now
mm,
this stuff is really getting a hold of me. But when I was doing the abstract work, it'd be like, and I'm OCD and I'm pedantic. Virgo, so I'm screwed. And it would be like every seventh painting or something, it'd be like, oh shit,
yeah,
where did you
yeah,
go? I was like, oh, that one more thing is like, oh crap, couldn't you have left it alone? Now, how are you going to get out of this? So sometimes 2, 3, 4 paintings would go by, and that sucker would be sitting there staring at me going, ha, 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 right? I don't know. I mean, what
yeah.
is it
I've
that
got,
makes painters think the way they do?
yeah, no, I've absolutely done that where I get to a point and it's like, I just got to turn this around and not look at it, not have it look at me for a while.
Yeah.
And then maybe I'll pull it out. And that's what I've been learning to do more of, because maybe I was too quick I was one of those guys who was ready to scrape and sand down
Mm-hmm.
my panels and
Mm-hmm.
start again. But I do realize, and I've always took it to heart, what I was taught, that you can learn something even from a bad painting.
Yeah.
And um, the other thing that I have that I get, Steve Remick and I have talked about this many times, is just getting, once the painting's done, I don't have as much heart for it. It's like the fun's done. So it's like,
Like a
okay.
one-night stand.
Yeah, it really
A
is.
conceptual one-night stand is like, yeah, thanks a lot. That wasn't good for
Yep.
you. Bye-bye.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's like I don't have a lot of respect for it when it's done. But I don't know. I'm starting to come back to them, and I'm starting to, now that I've got a good 20 years of serious painting, I call it, under my belt, and looking back at it all, that helps too, is to pull them all out and look back, and then you start to see the ones that really are special for a reason, and those I will pull aside. Because somebody asked me recently, is like, oh, you must have a ton of your own paintings, and I'm like, yeah, they're all stacked up. I mean, I don't, and I don't know about you, but I don't have a lot of, I was taught even in high school, I had a great high school teacher, art teacher, who was cruel in a good way, like where if he knew I wanted to go to art school, and I remember him many times coming by and saying, yeah, that's looking pretty good, and then he'd take it and rip it up and say, do it again. And I tell people that, and they look at me like I drowned a puppy, and I say, no, but I do have that healthy sort of, yeah, it's not the preciousness you were talking about.
Yeah. Herb
Like,
Cummings did that the first day of a figure drawing class with him. He just let us hang ourselves 2.5 hours of drawing. Kind of like, is it done? Is it done? Are we ready? Are we gonna stop? Whatever it is. And then he had us all gather in a circle and hold our drawings on the top right and left corner, but facing towards the inner circle. And then he said, okay, I want you to take your right hand and I want you to put it to the right of center, and your left hand to the left of center. And we, so we're all dutifully doing it. And he said, okay, now I want you to rip it. And everybody froze. And he started laughing. And he says, okay, it's only perspiration. And then he said, do you know what the hardest part is of potty training a child? And we're going, what is wrong with this guy? What the hell is this? He says, the hardest part of potty training a child is not what you think. It's getting them to flush. And we're like, what? And he says, that's right. Because they are petrified of seeing a little part of themselves flushing away forever. So that was like, oh my God, talk about the cold bucket of water. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Yeah.
Wow. That's a great story. I like that. I'm going to use that.
Yeah. Been trying to get Alma on the show, but every time we just talk socially, we get, we're going to have to probably like do wine. Maybe it would stop us from getting emotional about talking about our dad, Yeah. So, what one final question and we'll wrap it up. Actually, the second to the last question.
Okay.
There are so many landscape painters because, you mentioned Steve Remick, and I was like, gee, imagine a show of the two of you together. Has anybody ever pulled off a show with all of just landscape painters out of this area?
I don't recall. I don't know if Kate had one. I don't recall one. Steve and I had a show together about 2 years ago at the Grimshaw Gudowitz at BC. Because we thought it would be interesting to get his rural paintings and my urban paintings together. And that was fun.
The city mouse, country mouse kind of thing.
Yeah. It was a little bit of that, but a lot of it had, and Steve gave me the impetus about 10 years ago to paint on hollow core doors, like big long landscapes on hollow core light. Because he was doing that. And he said, you should try that because they're really great. And
if you can get them without them being mortised out, for the doorknobs, it's even better.
Yep. So I have about, I don't know, 8 of those that I did. And so the show was built around those. He had some of his big wall paintings, and I had the, paintings of downtown New Bedford or whatever. But I think it would be an interesting show if we could get a few others out there. Trying to think of who. off the top of my head. I mean, Ben certainly.
Hmm.
Sig would show with us probably, but I don't know. Um, I'm trying to think who else there was. Well, even Craig Coggeshall did a lot of landscapes back
Hmm.
before he started on his still life and
Hmm.
interior scenes. Wonderful painter.
Yeah,
Wonderful.
it'd be great if we just got a curator. It's too bad Lass is leaving town.
Is
Lasse
he?
Antonsen. Yeah, he's moving out to um, Washington State. In fact,
Really?
I could be wrong. I think it's an island off the coast. You know, I could be wrong about that, but it is Washington State. He'd be leaving it not too long from now.
Oh, geez. That's too
Yeah,
bad.
yeah, because he would have been phenomenal to curate that kind of a show.
Oh, sure he would have. Yeah.
Because
Yep.
in conversation with you, it
Yep.
painted pictures in my head and like, oh my God,
Yeah.
we have this incredible graphic artist, a graphic novelist
Mhm.
community here.
Yeah.
Like with Fitz and so on and so forth.
Yep.
And Ryan Santos, and I mean, it's just like, and then there's
Yeah.
just tons of people. And then
Yeah.
there's also this incredible landscape tradition. And I'm
Right.
not talking the boats and water kind of
Yeah.
Louis Sylvia, school
Yeah.
of thought. It's a whole different,
Oh, yeah.
powerful
Yeah.
thing. All right.
Well, Milton, there's,
Oh, Milton. Yeah, but Milton is in his own realm.
yeah. Oh, yeah.
A man and his dog, an artist and his dog. I mean, I'm really been breaking my head trying to figure out, what could be done with that, because that
Yeah.
when he's gone, it's going to be so iconic.
Yes, it is. It is.
You
And
know?
he's so prolific too.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
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 So, with all that in mind, and I asked this most of the guests, how would you like to be remembered when you're gone?
I'd like to be remembered as a storyteller because I think the older I get, the more I realize that that's really all at a base level. That's what the arts are about, is telling a story, either in song or in book form or visually or in dance or a million other things. And I think that storytellers are important for us. And just looking around us at all the bad storytellers that are out there, I think in my opinion, I think it would be, and I'm not talking about writers per se or whatever. I just think that uh, if if more artists got back to just simply trying to tell a story that is 2/3, 3/4 done, with the rest of the story to be filled in by the viewer, that interactive part, I think it would be very good for our collective intelligence. I think that that's missing in America now. Everything is full. It's like every movie has to have a conclusion, has to be wrapped up via Hollywood. Every book has to have that sort of ending, unless it's an independent sort of thing. Um, and every painting has to be, what's the question I get most of the time when, besides the usual, oh, how long did that take you? Which, why does that matter? And the other thing is, where is that? And I'll say, where do you want it to be? Because it's not really about that. I don't paint, you know, certain, I don't paint motifs. I paint a painting that I think is telling a story. Sometimes I don't even know the story, but I think that that's a special thing to be able to do that. And I like to be remembered as that, as a storyteller.
And it's funny, it goes right back to your childhood looking at that art instructor on WCVB. It was about the
It really
story.
does. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's all about
It
the
was
story.
magic.
And you're right, because I used to tell my art history students, I used to ask them, what's the difference between an illustration and a painting? And they
Uh-huh.
give me a whole bunch of answers, and I said, this is it. An illustration is complete. Okay.
Yeah.
It's the beginning, the middle, and the end is all there. There's nothing left to
Yep.
the imagination. A painting, okay, an objective painting, there's the rest of the story that you can wade into it,
Right.
um,
Right.
and just look at some of those. I remember in college being thunderstruck by the luminists.
Yeah.
You know, oh my God. I mean, you could feel the cold air on your nose. Your nose would start running kind of, you know, the majesty, that, you know, phenomenal. You couldn't get that from an illustration.
No,
You know?
you couldn't. So.
Well, the other thing too, Randy, that I tell everyone too, is that this is not a one and done. I like to visit as many of the artists that have been on this podcast as many times as I can get them to come back, and as many times as I've got the wherewithal to do it, because, you know, it is still a one-man show. Wasn't meant to be that way at all, but that's the way it happened. And you know, at some point in time, like I said, somebody 20 years up the road or more is going to think that this is the coolest thing because they owned a couple of your paintings and they've only seen pictures of you, but now they actually heard you speak. And I think that's really, really important too. Yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate you doing it. I think I've listened to, I think, every one of them. Yeah, even people I knew, I've learned something. I mean, you know, I can't wait to see Jim Bobrick again, because I think we lived in the same apartment at different times.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, and I feel like you know, I guess I don't know if the catbird seat is the right analogy, but yeah, I'm older than some and younger than most. My memory is pretty sharp still. I remember stuff a lot of people don't, but the connections and then the oh my gods that you get out of this, and then also too, it's kind of therapy. This is like, you know, it's like therapy, because you said a lot of things that are like, yeah, I feel your pain, or yes, I feel your joy, or I totally get what you're talking about, where, you know, a pedestrian, to use that term, would be looking at us going, the hell are they talking about? It's the same thing the marketers used to say to you, like, what the hell's he talking about? I got proof. People want the word premium.
Yeah.
You know what? Do an experiment. Put the word premium in a couple of your paintings and see if they sell faster.
That'd be funny, actually.
Randy, thank you so much. Hope to do it again. And I know David will be thrilled. He's going to really, I tell you, he has to be one of the most up people I've ever met in my life. He is phenomenal. I don't remember the name of the character, but I did admit to him that he reminds me of one of the Muppets in the band.
Really?
Yeah, not Animal the drummer, but the other guy with the glasses, and it just reminds me of him. He is phenomenal. He is phenomenal.
Yeah.
Thanks so much.
All right, you're welcome.
Have a great evening.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Yeah, bye-bye.
We'll see you next week for another episode of the Southcoast Artist Index podcast. The Southcoast Artist Index podcast is brought to you in part by Heavenly Spirits, who invites you to celebrate the art of life and creative communities everywhere. Learn more at heavenlyspirits.com. To learn more about the Southcoast Artist Index, visit theartistindex.com. Find us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. Be the artist you believe you are, and let's take care of each other out there.